Wayne and Shawn, I've done the best I can. It's up to you.
I told Wade that we could really use his help bailing us out tonight, but we want to do something a little bit different tonight. We came to a realization that for the first time since antiquity, and by antiquity I mean back in the days of Methuselah, we have a most unique opportunity. In our culture, and more specifically for our purposes, in our churches, we have as many as 5 or even 6 generations that are living together, working together, worshiping and serving together. And so we felt that in a generation in which it seems as if we're good at talking about one another, or maybe even talking at one another, that it would be good for us to open a dialogue where we talk to and with one another in regards to the generations. The gap is as broad as it has ever been, and yet in the church it should not be that so. And so tonight, Shawn and I are going to begin what we hope will be an ongoing conversation, not just between he and I, but between all of us as we come together to be what God calls us to be, a family that recognizes and realizes the value of each part and uses those differences not as a disadvantage, but our true advantage to being what he's called us to be. And so you can decide who you think is younger and who you think is younger. And they both are Shawn. So anyway, Shawn, I'm going to let Shawn get us started, but we are glad that you're here tonight and hope that you find our time together beneficial.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And just so y'all know, this is an AI photo, so if you're wondering why do they look a little off, well, I mean, might be mistaken for who we are, but this is AI. That's why my hands look like they're sausage fingers, you know?
Yeah. Now, we're not AI. We do look this way in real life.
If you look at Wayne's hair, he does not have that much hair. But anyhow, so thanks to Wayne for doing that. And yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, why don't we jump in, okay?
Yeah, sure.
I've got a question for you.
Okay, I'm waiting. I'm as excited and nervous as you are about what he's going to ask.
So who has shaped your faith in your life, Wayne? So I want to hear about someone who's older than you, who has shaped your faith, someone who is younger than you, and then someone who is around the same age as you. So if you could hit those 3, okay, that would be great.
Some of you may not know, I grew up in a preacher's household, and I was surrounded by church people and preachers all my life. So I have sat at the feet, literally, of dozens of men who I really respected. In addition, I served in churches, or my dad served in churches, and I grew up in churches where there were some wonderful women who, in their service, in their teaching, in their encouragement, all helped. Some of them are rolling over in their grave going, all the work we put into him, this is what he has become. But obviously, for me, first off is my mom and dad, right? I mean, my dad was a gospel preacher for more than 50 years. My mom was a faithful Christian as well. I think they made a great team. They would be the first to admit they weren't perfect in every respect. But if I had to say what I took away from growing up, it would have been them. It would have been them and the good things. The bad things, I was able to create most of those on my own. But I also had individuals that, I was just sharing a story this afternoon. There is a former teacher, I say former because he passed away here just a couple months ago, a man by the name of Ed Horton at the Sunset School of Preaching, now the Sunset International Bible Institute. And I remember I was about 10. He was in town for a gospel meeting. We put him up in my sister's room. It was ready to go to PM services, and my dad said, go get Ed, tell him it's time for us to go. And of course, you know, Mr. 11-year-old or 10-year-old, I just raced into the room, didn't knock or anything. And I found Ed Horton on his knees praying. And I realized, wow, it's not just who he is when he's at the lectern or in the pulpit, but he's a real person, and faith was real to him. And so I literally could list hundreds of those examples of olders who really reminded me, even as a younger, they made that impression on me. Youngers is different because when you get to be my age, the youngers remember stranger danger, right? In other words, I come walking over to talk to them and they're like, I don't think we're supposed to talk to him, okay? But so they flee, but I am inspired by my sons, two of whom are youth ministers full time. They remind me of finding my own faith in that. In other words, they do take on for a while an adoptive faith, but they have grown. But I have been really blessed to be surrounded by a lot of young men and young women. And by that, I mean, early teen years to maybe early college years who first of all, I always say a friend is somebody who knows you, but likes you anyway. And they have known me pretty well and they like me anyway. So they're constantly making me want to be that anew, that afresh. As far as guys who are my age, well, they're all dead. So that's it. But no, I have a few people that I have a kind of a confidant. He and I do not speak all the time. His name is Dean. He lives in Denver. There was a time that we saw each other regularly at church, and we served together. But now geography and just life circumstances. But I always said, Dean is the guy that I could call at any time with any problem. And he says, I'm on my way. Now, he might get there and give me a lecture on my bad behavior, but there's something about knowing that even now when I will send a message, just go, hey, you're another year older. You'll never catch up to me, though. He will barb back, but we might not talk again for a year. And I only see him now every couple of years. But again, we were close enough at those times, and I think probably the influence came because for a time, he was in my life, I was in his life. We worked, we worshiped, we served, we planned, we taught together, and those things, they stayed solid. They stayed solid. So.
And as you're talking, I hear kind of it kind of reminds me of people who have influenced me. You talked a lot about your family, right?
Yeah.
About your wife, about your dad, about your kids. And so I can relate to that, right? Because my dad, many of you have met my dad. He comes and helps cook, and he's been a rock for our family. And I've learned a lot from him and how to stay faithful through just horrible times in life. And I look up to him and have a lot of respect for him. And it's by the grace of God he's where he's at, and still he's held on to God and Jesus. And I think he's passed that on to me, and I'm very grateful. And my wife is 4 years younger than me, but that's close enough, right?
Yeah. That's still younger.
But she's a huge help to me. As especially in ministry. I mean, your spouse is a vital part of that, right? And
sure.
Staying in ministry for any length of time. And so my wife is there, and then my kids, they have influenced me in big ways. I know they're only 5, I know they're only 3, but here's what I can say about my kids. I tell people I didn't realize how selfish I was until I got married. And then I had to try to shed all this selfishness with the help of the Spirit. Well, then we had kids. We had Owen. And man, I have just realized how much more selfish I was. And so my kids have really helped me learn how to just completely, through the Spirit's help, by the grace of God, just shed that layer after layer of selfishness. When times when I can't just let them be. I can't just let them run around. I've got to do something to take care of them. And so they have really influenced my faith and just what does it mean to be a child of God?
Right.
Right? Because if He is our Father, my kids need me, and they desire to have a relationship with me. And when I get home, they're excited to see me, and it's like, man, what a beautiful picture of what it should be with our Heavenly Father. That desiring that relationship and that excitement to say, Father, I'm here. Play with me. Let's spend this time together. Let's enjoy each other's company. And
he goes, not right now, son. I don't have time. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's.
Well, let me back you up real fast, because you said something there that we talk about the people that are our pillar, the people that got us through a difficult time, the rock you described. Mm-hmm. Do you know of, and I don't necessarily mean that you can name them, but do you know of people that were your father's strength in the time that in other words, we think he was my rock at the same time. It was like my dad. There were times that I now realize he was barely holding on, and I was holding on to him. So it's kind of like, I know you've got me, but who's got you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so my dad, he's been through a lot, and he doesn't always share. And as he's gotten older, he has begun to open up and share more and more. And so I would say for him, obviously it's God, it's Jesus. But
Sure.
beyond that, I think, and I actually need to ask him this.
Yeah.
This would be a great question for me to talk to him about. But here's what I know. I think for him, his kids, he held on to us.
Yeah.
And he was
In
there.
other words, he didn't just anchor you, you anchored him as well.
I think, yes, it was a mutual relationship. Yeah. And I think I see that now, which is how it should be, right? It should be the whole family unit, parents and kids, or it should be where we anchor each other. And we give each other purpose. We give each other a reason to hold on and to make it through and to not give up and to stay steadfast. And I think I'm going to have to ask him, though, about the others.
I ask it because as an older, I think about the times when, and by the way, as an older who's also in ministry, there are people that come to me for some wisdom or some counsel or some general guidance or even prayer. And I know that I don't always have that opportunity to say, well, I'm finally at my spiritual pinnacle here. I'm glad that I can hold you up. Mm-hmm. When I'm going, yeah, you should have heard me talking to the traffic on the way in this morning. You may want a different counselor. But realizing that even though we may be as olders, or for that matter, as youngers, helping one another, it doesn't mean that in our helping, we are not needing to be helped as well. Or maybe like you and I, it's reciprocal, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, man, I appreciate you helping me with that. And you going, well, hey, I appreciate your thoughts on that. And recognizing the need that even the strongest have something that they hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm anxious to hear what your dad says.
Yeah.
He won't mention me by name, I know, but...
on the next edition of Young and Younger, stay tuned.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'll definitely talk to him, but you mentioned ministry, and here I know you've been in ministry, but can you tell us about that? What drew you into ministry? How did you end up in ministry? What did God do in your life to lead you to that place?
I did not take... There's very little about my life. For as conventional as it was growing up, it's not been really conventional. I went off to college to be an ad man. I wanted to do graphic design, advertising. That's what I figured. I'll find my way to Madison Avenue someday. I went for a semester to a Christian university, went back home to chase a girl that I didn't marry, took a summer job that ended up being a 16-year career in mechanical contracting. And even though my dad was a preacher and I figured that I would preach, it wasn't until almost at the age of 40, I walked in with 5 kids and very little savings and told my wife, I quit my job and I'm going to go into ministry. And so she said something really important to me. Because you would think that the wife would go, what are you thinking? I think she thought that. She just didn't say it out loud. But she said, well, I knew you were a preacher. She said, when I first met you, I did not find you particularly impressive. I know. Hard to believe, but a true story nonetheless. And she said, but I remember you giving a Wednesday night devotional talk. And I went, oh, I know it well. I call it Butchering Psalm 23. It was a powerful message. She said, and I looked up at you, and I leaned over to my friend, and I said, I could marry a guy like that. She says, I knew I married a preacher. I just needed to wait until you knew that you were a preacher. And I don't mean that to be so grandiose. We talk about, is it a calling? Is it foolishness? Whatever. But in retrospect, it probably was who my father wanted me to be and who I had actually trained in many respects. I mean, I gave my first literal sermon at 8 years of age to a congregation of about 500. So it wasn't that was foreign to me, but to see that as my primary focus. And so for me, what happened is job, ministry, my family could all converge and me be able to focus my attention on the thing. I could put all my attention to work on all of those things at once. And so, I don't know if it was calling. I waited for the bump in the night, but I think that was just the burrito.
Mm-hmm.
It was calling to me. So I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but that's kind of how I got here, and then took a job in a pulpit ministry and have done several things since then. And
Yeah, no, that's great. And God leads us to different places and different seasons of life, and sometimes, you said your father, that's what he wanted, and I would say, the big man upstairs,
yeah,
right? The father,
yeah.
That's what he wanted. And so what he wants is going to happen in your life, right?
Yeah.
If you choose to obey and submit. And so your wife, Tammy's words to you, I think that's just affirmation, right?
Sure.
Of God's calling, of God's direction for your life, showing you like you were doing what you needed to be doing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about you? I mean, you grew up in a Christian home. I mean, you grew up in the church. What did you think of ministry or ministers? Was that something early on that you went, hey, maybe someday? I mean, I know that's not what you went to the university for, but did that draw on you?
So what I like to say is I went to Texas A&M to study construction science, and one of the big reasons I went there was because they had Aggies for Christ. And we had the Aggies come to Porter, where I grew up, and I made these connections with college students. Actually, Mark Clancy, the son of the Clancys, came to Porter, where I was a kid, in 1999. And also Nick Smith and Teresa were there, and there's a picture from probably 2000 of my family with Nick and Teresa from those trips. And so I went there to study construction science. And so I would say you don't go to A&M to study ministry, at least not formally. And so I think in the back of my mind, it was there. And Erin told me, because we were talking about some of this, and she said, in college, you told me, like, you're going to go work. This is what I said. I'm going to go work. I'm going to go get a bunch of money, and then I'm going to go into ministry. That's what I said.
That's a good plan.
And so,
I mean, the ministry part's a little sketchy, but I know what you're saying.
But two of those things happened out of the three, and lo and behold, it was. I worked for an oil company, and it was not for me. And I just knew, I was like, okay, if I'm going to give my life to something, it's got to be something that lasts, is how I felt, right? And I really think this was a calling that God put on my life. Something, not that I had planned, but something where he said, no, this is the route you're going to go on. And I think it was always there in the back of my mind.
Did you have what you might call a calling moment? In other words, man, I mean, it hit me. I mean, there was something either that happened, someone that said something. I mean, is there like that? Sometimes we think it's going to be big Abrahamic, this is I, Lord. But
So growing up at Porter, there's a preacher, growing up, a very influential person in my life. His name was Tyrone Minear.
Okay.
And he was a preacher for sometime in the 90s to 2000s. And I spent a lot of time with Tyrone. And Tyrone's a good guy, and he used to say so many encouraging things to me, and he was really kind of like, Shawn, God's got something big for you in your life. And he saw that, and I think what he was doing is looking at me in the same way Jesus looked at his disciples, and he said, I see who you're going to become one day.
Yeah, that was the Tammy thing. I see who you're going to become.
Yeah, not who you are now, but who God is going to mold you and make you into. And so I think having someone like that, and he was constantly there, and once again, in very formative years. These are my teen years. These are years when my parents were going through a divorce, and to have someone who is consistently there and just speaking that over you, to you, you start to believe it and say, okay, let's see what God has in store.
Well, you said that about starting to believe, so maybe initially he goes, Shawn, I see who you're going to become, and you're going, I'm looking in the mirror, I ain't seeing that guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the benefit of one who's walked that path ahead of you and can look maybe 2 steps back. You see the mountain of, man, here's the chaos going on in my life. Here's what I'm trying to figure out life in general. And now here's my parents' situation, all these things. And he's going, hey, on this side of the bump, you're being shaped. Or if you'll allow it, God will shape and mold you to be a person that he can use, however that ends up, whether it's full-time ministry or something else.
Yeah, and if you want to know his secret, I'd go to his house and work in his yard and help him out. And he used to eat, Tyrone is one of the few people I know, he would always eat Spam, just like every day. And he'd be like, hey, you want to take a break?
Book right there.
You want to take a break? And he'd go cook some eggs and fry some Spam up, and we sit around and eat it. And I'm like, why am I eating Spam? But that's not what was important.
The option was locusts and wild honey, just so you know, in the preparatory stage.
Yeah, so Spam was a good option.
Yeah, that was exactly right.
Lo and behold, I'd eat Spam on Trek years later, and it would be delicious, but
yeah.
Maybe not when I was a teenager.
But those moments of just being present, right?
Yes, yeah.
And you being able to even surrender to a vision that he had for you that wasn't something.
Yeah, and I think this is important for the older generations to hear when they're interacting and looking at the younger generations, right? And even if you're 30, 25, guess what? I've got kids who are younger.
Yeah, I was starting to say, it hit me after we created this. I'm like, you're 37,
yeah,
right? You've been married
2014, so almost 12 years.
She's listening, so
yeah,
okay.
She is. May 30th.
You've been at Memorial about 14 years.
Yeah, coming up on 14
You've got
years.
2 kids. It sounds like this is old and older. Okay, you don't sound that young,
yeah.
But I do know that young is closer to where you are than where it is to me. I don't even remember young. I tried to, but I don't even remember it.
Yeah, and I felt really old when I broke my ankle playing flag football a couple years ago with 5th and 6th graders. So
yeah, welcome to 40.
Welcome, yeah, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
So. But let's see. What about you? Who was it? Was there someone who really spoke over you, or who influenced you in a way?
You know, you mentioned it, and it seems trite. It seems kind of formulaic to say it. You mentioned a wife alongside of you. I worked for 16 years as an adjunct instructor at a school of preaching, and the number one challenge that young preachers to be faced were spouses, not that weren't spiritual, but they didn't want to be a preacher's wife for whatever reason. Could have been financial, could have been what they felt would be imposed upon them as the preacher's wife, quote unquote. I've been very fortunate to have a wife, and she's not here in town, and I hope she's watching online so she'll hear me say this. My wife grew up in a Christian home. She will tell you about her wild child years and how some circumstances brought her back to the Lord. But I have watched her, and without it sounding prideful on my standpoint, I have watched her start here and move past me in spirituality. And she's run off with another man. His name is Jesus. And she's off there, and I feel like I'm playing now catch up constantly. So when we had 5 kids, no savings, and I quit my job to go 2 years into a preaching school when we only had $800 a month worth of support, which started in 3 months after we started, she was there. She was supportive. It wasn't as much that she was the one that called me into ministry, but she could have really quickly said, what are you thinking? Mm-hmm. This is wild-haired, okay? This is reckless. But she's always been the one that kind of, even when I reached those hurdles, whether it was in parenting or whether it was in just health or life, and it was in ministry, she's going, come on, come on, come on. And I'll just say this honestly, there were times when I loved my wife more than I loved Jesus. And I wanted to be near her, and it kept bringing me closer to him. In fact, I tell her frequently I need to be careful that she does not become my idol, that I keep loving more than Jesus. But in a desire to be near her, she was becoming closer to him. And so that encourages me. Even today, when things are pretty good for us and ministry is pretty good for us, there'll be times when I'm like, well, we could kill them all and let God sort it out. She goes, murder is against God's law. And I said, but it is forgivable. And she goes, it's also a felony. And I go, good point. Let's stop. Okay. So, but she's been very, my dad, yeah. I like to believe that he would be proud of what I have, quote unquote, accomplished in ministry. But she's still there and going, I'm your biggest fan. And I went, bless your heart. You know that rule, right?
Yeah.
Bless your heart, sweetheart. So, and she is, and I'm glad for that. Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, okay? So thinking about generations, how do you think your generation's experiences have shaped the way you understand faith, you understand the church? So that's how do you think your generation's experiences, maybe tell us what those experiences are, some of them, but then how have they shaped the way that you see faith in the church?
Here's the problem with the question. It's not your fault, but I've always been my generation. I gave a presentation at Oklahoma Christian University in their chapel, and I got up and I said, where you are, I once was. And where I am, meaning my age, you will be prayerfully one day. This is what you have to look forward to. I think it was very discouraging to the student body as a whole, but my point is that I've always measured everything as my generation as the baseline, but it used to be that my generation were the teenagers. My generation were the young adults. My generation were the newly married or new parents. And now my generation is an older generation. And I look back and I go, that can't be me. I can think of experiences, but I mentioned to somebody 9/11 and they give me this blank look on my face. I mentioned Katrina. I recently had a room full of young men and I made a comment about John Wayne and there was this deer in the headlight and I go, how many of you know who John Wayne is? Over half the room did not raise their hand. And I went, you're all ignorant. I don't know what, Lord help the land of the future. But so I think there are things, whatever was the circumstance that we went through, whether it was time of war, time of poverty, time of political unrest, time of battles on college campuses, times of protest. By the way, you're going, well, that was yesterday. But you know what I'm saying is all of those gave me an option every time to do one thing or the other. Abandon a pursuit of God or draw closer to Him for the protection. And it wasn't the experience, it was the reaction or the response to the experience, right? So in other words, I meet someone who is older than me. I was thrown off here a few years ago. I was on a shuttle at an airport, and the guy across from me was definitely aged. He was older than me significantly, and I noticed on his hat it said Vietnam veteran. And I went, that can't possibly be. Vietnam veterans are young, thin men with blonde crew cuts and horn-rimmed glasses because they had all been locked in my mind in time from that 1968 through 1971 period of time. But guess what? We all got old. And so for me to look at that, I'm going, that can't be me. But I realized that those things have shaped me and been part of it. And yet, I don't know that my experiences now are significantly worse. I mean, trust me, dating, I was like, this is unbearable. It's just that it's a different kind of unbearable. It may be getting out of bed going, this is killing me, or it may be dealing with something else that I go, man, I never thought I'd have to deal with this. I felt the same way when I was 10. I just didn't realize that the fact that not everybody came to my birthday party was not quite as devastating as I thought. And then they sent a present, so I didn't care. Right?
Yeah. And
okay, so how about you? Because you are not just younger than me. You work with our bridge and with our junior high, high school, middle school kids. How do you think today's experiences are shaping them or affecting them, maybe is the...
Well, so that's a great question, and I just want to speak about kind of my perspective on things, right? Because the iPhone came out in 2007, and since then, my goodness, the world looks a lot different. I think for all of us across the board, right? I observe people and I watch and I see so many people who are on their screens and such, just digitally distracted is what I would say. And so I think I see this with our teens. I saw this weekend. Aaron and I had some of the bridge students at our house, and some of them, they were spending so much time on their screens. And so for me, I see that and I'm like, you know what's important now in this moment, I think, is the ministry of presence, of being with people and fully engaged, not distracted. Because you can be here, and if I pull out my phone and start messing with it, that communicates that you're not very important, that you don't matter.
We're electronically connected, but we're disconnected in relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's so important when it comes to faith, because as people who follow Jesus, as people who claim to love others, we should let them know that you are if it's just me and you talking, you should be the most important thing going on right now in this conversation. And I think I see that with really, it's across the board. It's the older generation. I've been around people who are distracted in that way. Not everyone, but some. I see that with my generation. I know I've been working on that myself, trying to just avoid that. And I see that in the younger generation as well. And so I think there is a need for us to consider, right? What is this doing to us? What is this digital world that we live in? Is this good for us? Actually, there's a lot of studies that right now they say social media and the addiction is the new smoking, is what they say. And that's problematic for many reasons, but I think the biggest reason, one of the main reasons in the church is we need to feel connected, and we need to realize that Jesus connects us, and isolation and loneliness is a struggle. Yeah. And I fear for the younger generation that if we don't help them realize this in-person connections are so important without being distracted, that it's going to leave them anxious and isolated, and it's going to wreak havoc in their spiritual life. And I don't even know if that answered your question,
it did. But let me add something to that, because as we talk about, does the older generation know where the younger generation's head's at, and vice versa? We've had, and I think it's moving quicker now because of technology, but we had any number of things that we were told, this is going to destroy you. I mean, we used to have to set so far back from the color TV or the microwave because it was going to fry our brains. But it didn't. We're fine, okay? But my point is, there are constant distractions.
Yeah.
And I think they're moving faster. But can I tell you, I think olders struggle as much with the technology. And I don't just mean how to turn on their phone. I mean that it can be, we met a woman at one of our marriage seminars, and her husband, and he came up afterwards and said, I wish you'd talk more about technology. And I thought, I know what he wants. Hello, Myrtle, get me the general store. That wasn't what he said. He goes, my wife is in love with Candy Crush. When I wake up, she's playing it. When I go to bed, she's playing it. When we're watching TV, she's playing it. We virtually never speak anymore. And in a generation when we might lose a spouse or some of our friends, or we're just not as connected as we used to be, we find what my wife refers to as my very best friend. And then all of a sudden I realize I'm not talking to anybody, even the people that I can, because, well, she, and I call her a she will give me any information. She's always my ever-present companion.
Siri.
Yeah.
Siri, right?
Yeah. I mean, the other day I called, and Tammy, Alexa, and Siri were having it out in the living room. They were all mad, and it was terrible. I said, what is going on there? And she goes, I'm fighting with Alexa and Siri. And I hear Alexa go, yes, we are fighting. I mean, it was a bad thing. But my point is that I think we need to realize that those kinds of challenges still challenge us when we get older. This is as new technology to us as it is to youngers. And we are finding our way through that. And I think we don't like to admit that it's a problem for the youngers because it's a little self-indicting, right? When we go, well, once you've mastered the cell phone, I'm like, well, quit wearing it on a pocket on your belt. It looks like it's really your companion, or a holster, I guess. So.
Well, man, there's so much more we could talk about with that, and really with all this, we are just scratching the surface, I would say, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is just a very...
Okay, so let me elevate it or escalate it just a little bit. Not so much specifics of, because I agree with you on the technology thing, but what do you think for your generation, and maybe the one right behind you, what's the hurdle? Because clearly, though we're seeing statistically a little bit of an upturn in spirituality amongst youngers, that, I mean, you've been around this long enough to know, there's some hurdles. What's the hurdles for youngers in their faith walk, just in their, not just in life, but faith walk?
Yeah, I think it is being distracted, but also I think you hear the word authenticity quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And they want to see, and we live in a world where it's kind of like this picture, right? People did not realize that was an AI-generated photo. Some did, but not everyone. And we live in a world where it's hard to know what's real. It's hard to know what's genuine, what's authentic. And I think the younger generations, we long for authenticity. And I say that as someone who looks back at the people who taught me in Bible class growing up, my own family, instances in my own family, and really it's really sad because so many of those people, they weren't, as much as I can tell and where they've ended up in life, I don't think they were really as close to God and Jesus as I used to think, because their families are falling apart, their lives are wrecks, and that just doesn't happen if you are truly walking with Jesus and He is leading you and you walking in step with the Spirit, and you have the fruit of the Spirit and you're abiding in Christ. And I think it's important, right, we want to see authenticity. We want to have real conversations. We want to hear the stories of the elders about your struggles, not just the great times, but how do you sustain faith? How are you a follower of Jesus who still wants to follow Him decade after decade through the tough times? Because I know there's times when you've probably been by yourself, maybe with Tammy, and you're ready to throw in the towel, and you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But we want to see that and to know and see authentic faith, and we want to experience that as well, and know that God is real, and He is, right? But I think I would center just that word authenticity.
Yeah.
That's a hurdle, because these teens, some of these students out here, if you're fake, they pick up on it.
Yeah, in a hurry.
And in a hurry, and you will have no influence, and they will not let you get close to them.
Yeah.
If you are fake. And they, that's just how it is. They're really good at picking out those fakes.
I know that I'm a person that I don't like to show my flaws, even though I feel like I'm probably wearing a hat that says flawed with an arrow pointing down because everybody sees them. But I worry about that. So when it's time to be genuine, transparent, real, authentic, any word that we might attach to it is, but you won't respect me if I'm flawed. When I'm learning from guys like you, gals like you, is they go, I actually have greater respect for you because you've not painted yourself as a perfect character, right, without flaws, or I've never made a mistake. Or I go, well, I've made a mistake in my day, but instead of going, yeah, I'm still not sure I have figured this all out.
And I think what that does, right, for us to hear that and the different generations to communicate, which is important, and to hear those stories about how God was there in the tough times and about those tough times, it's no longer a y'all versus us. It's now becomes we're in this together, right? It's we're united. and common experience and common bond. And I think it's important. And so I think I just checked the clock, and I think we probably need to wrap up soon. So why don't we quickly?
I have never wrapped up soon in my life, but I think you're right. I think one of the things we've demonstrated is this is an ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah.
In other words, man, start getting into the nitty gritty, start getting into the ditch with these things. You start realizing, I just think we have a lot more in common than we think we do. I think olders are just as fearful as youngers are. We just do a better job maybe of hiding it. And that we have struggles, but we think our struggles are bigger than their struggles. And we are probably as disconnected, even with those who are our generation, than we ever are. And so it kind of requires this, let's keep talking about not just today, but what does the future look like? What does it hold? How can we not just hold to one another, but hold one another closer to Jesus?
Yeah, I've got one more question.
Uh-oh,
Just real quick.
This is always the one that concerns me.
Real quick though, I would say one word, but it's hard to do. But just quick. So
Okay.
like, what is the hope you have for the future of the church? Where do you see hope?
Well, it's a lesson I'm still learning, is to quit trusting us with the future. As the elders, I know that I don't have all of the answers, but I'm going to go, this is what I think's the thing. I want to, at times, be controlling. I want to manipulate, not in a bad way, but I'm like, I got to do whatever to make this thing work. And Jesus goes, you know, when I created all of you, I was going to make everything work. And you were going to watch after the garden that I gave you. And sometimes I'm like, I've heard when we set in lines for gasoline in the early 70s, this is the end of it. I saw presidents elected and they go, oh no. And this is not a commentary even on our current president. It was a matter of, this is the end of it all. And I've seen the same thing church-wise. And the answer is, I'm going to trust in a generation that comes behind me, but more importantly, I'm going to trust in Jesus. Because he's going to be our success. He's going to be what pulls us together. He's going to be what keeps us connected. And to make that more than just a platitude, but to lean into that and to live like that's who I really trust. And then find the peace that passes all understanding, because now Jesus is doing what Jesus said he would do all along.
Yeah, I like that. Our hope has a name.
Yeah.
That's Jesus, right? And so I'm hopeful as I look in the generations, because what I see and have interacted with people who are much older, in their 60s and 70s, and even older than that. And what I see is like they're there, but they are still being changed by God as they follow Jesus. Still, this is after decades of following him. They've been through valleys, they've been through mountaintop experiences, but by the grace of God, they are still allowing Jesus to form them and to mold them. And so to see someone still allow God to change them, right? Because sometimes you're like, oh, they're stuck in their ways. But I've seen something different.
Some
and
that have changed their ways.
That's hopeful for me, because, right, God's not done with me yet. And even 30, 40 years from now, Lord willing, I'm still alive. He still will be working in my life and to mold and to make me and all of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's
And I've seen
hopeful.
young men and young women that I went, they will never get it.
Yes.
They're not. And then all of a sudden I went, oh, they are. They do. They will. And they're becoming the people that God, I just wanted to do it fast.
Yeah.
And God says, well, we can do it fast or we can do it right. Which way would you like to do it? And I went, fast. But anyway, but doing that, so.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I've got a few final words for our friends out here, and then we'll...
Oh, I didn't even see you all over there. That was great. I actually noticed, just so you know, just a lesson. When I started in the preacher position looking this way, looking at the listeners. And I went, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be having a conversation with you, so thought I might turn over here, and then I went, they're on their own, you know. But
It's okay. Old and older, right? So
that's exactly
figuring
right.
it out. So
Dull and duller. It's
Still-
a whole series. You're gonna love it. Yeah.
I just want to say to y'all, thank y'all for listening. And you know, faith is not something we carry alone. I am here because I'm standing on the shoulders of the generations who've come before me who chose to be intentional about passing on their faith. Because if you're 50, 60, 70, 80, if you wouldn't have chosen to stay faithful to God, I would not be here right now. My generation would be lost without any hope, and so thank you for that. We don't get to make up faith as we go. Our generation does not get to make up or create faith. No, it is passed down. Just like we see throughout the Bible, God's people passing on, telling the story of his redeeming love, right? We are one body, as it says in 1 Corinthians, and we have many parts. And so we need all of the generations together. We need to listen to each other, to learn from each other. We need to appreciate each other and how God has uniquely brought us together. People who maybe the world and society would say, you've got nothing in common, but what we have in common is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And that is the strongest bond that we can have on this earth. And I would encourage you, right? All of us need a Paul, someone who's older and wiser than us, who can counsel us further along than us. We all need a Timothy, someone who is younger than us that we are pouring our lives into as we are being filled up by the spirits. And then we need a Barnabas, someone who is encouraging us, who is maybe close to us, close to our age, who is there to constantly encourage us and to help us on this journey. Because faith is not something we do alone. And it takes the young, it takes the middle age, it takes the old, it takes all of us working together, centered around Christ. And we are all in this together. And what a beautiful display to the world when all of us come together with our differences and we say, no, we believe Jesus is the Son of God, He's Savior, and we have this hope as an anchor that will last through the generations. And so I have no plans of stopping to share my faith with my kids and the other younger generations. And by the grace of God, 100 years from now, faith will still be proclaimed here in Houston, Texas, because of everyone listening tonight.
Yeah.
And so I want to pray, and then
Please. Yeah.
as we close.
Yeah. Well, let me say too, for my elders, and that is, don't discount the younger mentors. Somebody said that youth is energy and enthusiasm minus wisdom, and being older is wisdom without any enthusiasm or energy.
Yeah.
In other words, we need one another. And so it is sometimes the youngers that are my greatest mentors. They remind me two people coming out of the water of baptism in the last couple of days. You go, oh yeah, when I first believed, I remembered what that was, and maybe that gets lost in all of that.
It's very much a mutual relationship, right? Where as much as I learn from you,
I
hopefully,
will someday learn something from you.
Hopefully.
I'm sure after my tutelage,
well,
you'll
but that's
be
not about
wise.
me. That's just about you being a slow learner. So
That's exactly right.
Right.
Slow and slower will be our next presentation. So why don't you pray us out of
But
this?
yeah, let me pray. And as I pray, I'm going to pray a little bit through Psalm 145. And in this psalm, it says, one generation will commend your works to another. And that is a commending God's works to another generation. That is a joyful, triumphant, that is a rejoicing passing on of the faith, right? And so to the older generation, show us the excitement and the joy that God has put in your life from years of following Him. Show us what it looks like to still be on fire for God and wanting to obey Him and to advance His kingdom. So let's pray. God, we come to you now and we're thankful for this night. And God, I pray for my generation, God. I pray for the younger generations. I pray for the kids. I pray, God, that you would keep us humble, that you would give us a posture of learning, that we would be willing to listen to the wisdom of the older generation, that we would be receptive to the faith that we are receiving that is being passed on, God. God, we want to remain faithful to you. God, we want to remain steadfast to you. God, help us not to look and to say, oh, how different the older generations are, but God, help us to have an appreciation. Help us to listen. Help us to learn. Help us to appreciate and to realize that we are standing on their shoulders and they are part of that great cloud of witnesses, God, and that we need each other. So, God, bless the younger generation. Be with us, God, as we seek to follow you all of our days.
God, for those of us who are olders, renew in us the wonderment of a life that is not yet over, a life that can be lived for you, the being amazed at what you have done, the curiosity of wanting to know more, the willingness to expose ourselves as those who have not yet understood everything or practiced everything completely, and yet to surround ourselves by those who are different, whether it might be in our talents, our abilities, our experiences, our backgrounds, and even our age, that we might, as that working body, work in harmony as we become Christ embodied and illuminated to the world who so desperately needs to know him. Father, we are thankful for Jesus and the hope that we have not only in unity and reconciliation and purpose and function, but in eternity as you preserve us through this life and into the life and the blessings and the rewards that come, simply put, by those who have given their trust to you and remained faithful in that trust. Father, I thank you for all who are here tonight and pray that you care for us as we go from here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand as Wade leads us in song.